whatever you think.
All right.
We're ready. We good?
Good.
Okay. So welcome to our board meeting. It is June 20th, actually Tuesday, June 20th. And in attendance, we have Ann Barton, board member, Colleen Benally, board members, Steve Black, Lori Mon, Nelson Yellman, board members. We also have the superintendent Nelson here, and our business administrator Tyrell Pemberton, and other personnel with us. So we will move to approve the agenda, if I can get a motion for that.
I motion to approve today's agenda.
Okay, motion by Colleen. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, we need
Okay, and then we will move to our scholarly report by the superintendent.
Yes, I'll make this quick and get us ahead of schedule on the agenda, but I wanted to take just a quick second to say thank you to the board, the San Juan School District Board of Education. It's been a very great opportunity of mine to be able to work closely with you, work through issues both thick and thin, easy and hard. You know that we've had both of those and all the way in between. But I appreciate you've shown a lot of faith in me and a lot of confidence. I counted up, I think we're pushing about 70 board meetings that I've been a part of in the last 6 years. And it's just been a really great opportunity to see what you do from your side of the table and to work directly with you. I have a huge respect for what comes your way and the decisions that you have to make, and working, you know, with our stakeholders and the valuable people we have in education, and just balancing all of that. It's very challenging, but you do a tremendous job, and I really appreciate all the opportunity I had to work with you. It will be one of the highlights of my career, so I really express appreciation to you. And this is my last opportunity to formally do that, so I didn't want to miss it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It has been a good opportunity to work with you, and also it's kind of sad to see him leave, but also exciting to see a new one come in. So, but you will, if we don't have a board meeting in July, obviously, then you won't be here, but August, just different seats.
Out there.
Okay? All right, so thank you. Okay, so as you guys can see, we have quite an agenda today, so if everyone, we're going to try and stick to task if we can. So we have our 2023 Navajo Youth Risk Behavior Survey, so Trevor. And then do you have Todd Jones joining us?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I have been invited to give a brief introduction to Mr. Todd Jones from the Navajo Nation Department of Health. Just with a little bit of background information, prior to COVID, we participated with the Navajo Nation Risk Behavior Survey, which collected data that is very similar to the SHARP survey that the San Juan School District Board has been supportive of gathering. So we did participate in the SHARP survey. This is very similar, but specific to data sovereignty with the Navajo Nation. And so Mr. Todd Jones can speak specifically to the information that's been provided with your documentation on the board, but we did participate with that prior to COVID, and we are supportive in collecting that data because not only the Department of Health for the Navajo Nation, but the state of Utah is very interested in trying to provide services to students that are in need on the reservation, and that Abajo, or the river region, is in need of that same data. And so specifically, we have been supportive in the past, we're supportive of that now. Todd Jones worked with us prior to COVID and helped us collect data, and is here to answer any questions for the board with that introduction. So I'll turn the time over to him for some information and any questions.
And I do apologize for not recognizing you. I thought you were going to be virtual, so, but welcome.
In person.
Okay? We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Board members, superintendent. My name is Todd Jones. I work for Navajo Nation Health Education Program, and my office is in Kansas, Arizona. But I cover the schools on the Utah portion of the Navajo Nation. So the survey that we're going to do is the Navajo Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So it's a national survey that's conducted by CDC, and every state does that within their schools. So for us, we do census. That means we do the whole school from 6th through 12th grade. So of course, the middle school, they have their own survey questions, and then high school would have their own survey questions. And of course, we'll have the consent form for parents to sign off on it. So the consent forms is basically, if the student brings a consent form back to the school, the parent has to check yes and they have to sign it. If they check no and they don't sign it, we can't implement the survey. So the main portion of it is they check yes and the parents sign it. And if they don't bring it back, then they can't take the survey. So just to let you know on that. So this is a national survey, like I said, so it entails in some of these categories as far as injury prevention.
Yes.
Injury prevention, and then unintentional injuries, physical activity, tobacco use, alcohol and drug use, and then sexual behaviors, and then, let's see, dietary behaviors as well. And then, of course, there's several questions that are related to Navajo specific. So like the clan question, the ancestral question, stuff like that too. So like ceremonial questions, stuff like that. It's only like maybe 5 questions. So basically it's, what we'll do is we'll have a packet like this with the survey question and the bubble sheet. And then we'll have our proctors. We'll have proctors for each classroom there in the time when we implement the survey. And then we'll just have the proctor just put the envelope like right there in front of the entrance to the classroom. And then they'll pass out the questionnaires and bubble sheets and then the pencils as well. And then we try to separate the students as far as possible as we can, depending on the class size. And then they have one class period to complete the survey. We try to implement the survey then the second quarter on Tuesday. So it cannot be during a basketball game or like maybe something going on at the school too. So we try to avoid those stuff. And then there's no personal identifiers going to be written on the survey questions or the answer questions as well. So if the student does that, then we just take a new bubble sheet and then transfer the answers. And then we shred the other one. So the one that has the personal identifiers on there. So that's what we do. I don't know if you guys have any questions, so that's...
Any questions?
I did, if I could. I know one of the biggest thing is mental health. How would this overall survey help our students when it comes to that? Like, would you bring in more programs or amplify the ones that we already have existing?
Mm-hmm. So basically, we just collect data, then we send it back to CDC, and they do the raw data, and then they send it back to Navajo Nation, and that's where we compile the data. And then from there, we do a report, and then basically what we do is we do like a dissemination plan for all the programs on Navajo Nation, even that the border towns that border the Navajo Nation as well. And then like for the school here, we can give you like that data, and then you can use that to support your school as far as programs. So for us, we don't specifically do like writing grants and stuff like that. So this is information for you, for the school, for the parents, stuff like that. So they can, I guess, ask for funding and grants and stuff like that too.
If I'm going to add to that on the school district side, the Department of Substance Abuse and Mental Health looks at the SHARP data as well as the Navajo Nation data to fund mental health and prevention programs in San Juan County. So whether it's San Juan County or San Juan School District, they're looking at that data. When we don't have that data, there is a conversation of what is needed, and we have to advocate that our schools are in need. So that data definitely helps us to submit that data to the state of Utah and say, here's the programs and here's our data to be able to fund those programs. So on the school district and the state of Utah and the county side, it's very valuable to have that data to be able to fund that very thing.
Okay.
Nelson?
Yeah, I'm just curious, and I wanted to know if I or any of the other board members have an interest in seeing those results, getting those data back, because I would like to see where the problems are in our schools or in our district.
Mm-hmm. Of course you can. We had the previous surveys that we did. We do it every 3 years. And so we did in 2008, 2011, then 14, then 17, and then this year, of course. So we have all that data. That's a trend. Of course, you guys seen it in your packet and stuff like that. So we have those graphs and everything in one big booklet. And it's like maybe I say about maybe 100 pages for middle school and high school combined. But they're separately in that report. So you're eligible to see, what the problems are within our schools, within our kids and stuff like that, with our youth. So basically so we have those available, yes.
I have a question, and this may be for Trevor and Todd, both of you, but are there incentives or rewards for, okay, good. I was just going to say for, if the student brings back the paper sign that they can take it. And Mr. Olson is back here saying no rewards. So the parent either wants them to take it or they don't, but they don't get incentivized for taking that survey, which I think is good. So thank you.
I did have one more thing, sorry. I was looking on the trend, or on the questionnaire itself. Are you going to be updating it for things like vape pens, or I just seen you put marijuana as an overall, but there's specifics to that. Would that be something that you could update on the questionnaire itself?
Yes, you can, but probably not this year, bro.
Okay.
So, basically, we had a question like that back in, I think it was 2017, the last survey that we did. So we had a vaping question in there. Yeah. So I looked at the survey briefly. I just browsed through it, see how many questions there were. So middle school, we have 60 questions. The high school has 90 questions.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, anything else, board? Okay, thank you. We appreciate your information.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, capital plan follow-up, Blanning Elementary site.
All right. This is just our regular follow-up, but this one has some significant importance as we move forward with our capital plan, specifically with Blanding Elementary School. One of the things that we needed to address and talk about today is the proposed site for Blanding Elementary School. Attached to the board docs is a site evaluation report that BDK, the company that has been helping us through this process and project managing for us, has done for our two existing sites. For our current Blanding Elementary site where the current school is located, and then the other property that we own on 800 North and First West here in Blanding. So that evaluation report just kind of breaks down some of the pros and cons. They've outlined that, and I think, Jared, do we have Clint and Chris on line as well?
Yes.
So if we have questions for them, about that report, they're here to help provide any expertise there. I kind of wanted to do this one in tandem with number 3 on our agenda, which is the architect selection. We did meet as an evaluation committee to evaluate those proposals that were submitted from we had 4 architectural firms submit. And as part of this site selection, that plays a big role in being able to move forward with the architect, because we can be working on just program and space documentation, but until we actually we know where we're putting the building, we can't really move forward with the design of the space, because we don't know what that's going to look like. We've had that evaluation report on board docs. Are there any questions that you have for us as administration or for Chris and Clint online about that? You can see at the bottom there is a recommended site at the end that they've come to a conclusion of, that the recommended site would be to move forward with 800 North and 100 West property.
What's your question? Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I know it's a substantial increase with the second site, which is the recommended site. Do we have kind of an estimation of how much or what substantial would mean in that?
So are you talking cost numbers?
Yes.
So
Sorry.
the substantial cost there is going to be the dirt work. The topography of that site is going to be the biggest challenge. There would be other challenges with utilizing our current existing site that would also incur some costs. So if Chris, are you online that you might could help us out with some answer here too, just to provide some expertise?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the question, if I could just restate, because I kind of heard, you got a little fuzzy there for a second, is what kind of dollar value? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, what kind of dollar value the moving to the 800 North 100 West site would incur, right? Is that correct? Okay.
Okay, so first of all, I hate to hedge my bets here, but it kind of depends on a couple things. First of all, the cost, there would be some costs that would incur if you stay on the existing site.
Right.
Those costs would be, you're very limited in what the building would look like. You'd have to go probably multiple stories, which costs more than single story. Plus, because of how small the site would be that you would build on, there would be a lot of design constraints that might add additional costs. Plus the fact that you'd be building on an occupied campus. So those are costs that you would incur if you were building on the existing site. The costs that you incur on the new site are kind of dependent on a couple things. First of all, the shape of the new building, which we don't have, would impact the costs. And so there is a lot of earthwork that has to go on this site, and how much is kind of dependent on a soils report, which we don't have yet, and also the shape and size of the buildings. The potential cost for the building itself costing less is pretty great on this 800 and 100, just because there's enough room there that you could potentially go one story at least on the classroom wings and stuff. So we initially estimated a couple $1 million in earthwork on the existing site that would probably be offset by the increase in the buildings cost. So this site where it would cost, like I said, 2 to 3 million more in earthwork would probably almost be 100% offset at the existing site. So in terms of site costing more, it would probably actually end up costing less than if you tried to build on the new one.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I know that that's a hedge bet answer, but it all really depends on the shape of the building and stuff. But I believe the cost of the building would be substantially less here and would probably offset the cost of the building depending on what the soils report says.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, if I can just jump in here just to correct you misspoke and you said this cost on the new site would be less than the cost on less than the cost on the existing site.
Well, the cost of the new site would be less probably overall. The cost of the earthwork would be more here.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Just wanted to clarify that the cost on the 800 West 100 or 800 North 100 West site would be less overall.
Less overall. The cost of the earthwork would be more, but the cost overall would probably be less, which is why we're recommending it. Plus,
Exactly.
Also in terms of flexibility and some of the other requests.
And to add one thing to what they shared too, when they gave us our original cost estimate for the building, one of the things as we were reviewing the sites is utilities. And Chris, Clint, you can chime in here as well, but we had estimated a much higher cost in utilities, and then upon review of the current or the proposed site here, and visiting with Blanding City, utility costs would actually be much lower than expected because there are existing utilities all along that property that could be tapped into. So that was one thing that came in from their estimate that was lower after reviewing the utility situation at the 800 North property.
Right. When you're dealing with a greenfield site, you always figure you're going to have to bring utilities from somewhere. But as Tyrell indicated, after we met with Blanding City, and I believe it's actually in the report, the utility map. I think it's the next one down. shows that you've actually got water, power, and the only one that you would have to bring to the site is in the very upper right portion of that photo, is you see the purple secondary irrigation water alongside the LDS church that would have to be brought down to the site. But other than that, you actually have access on the two main sides for all of the rest of your utilities. So you would only have a regular tap, which dramatically reduces the amount of cost that generally when you're on a greenfield site costs a lot more.
Any more questions?
And they are of sufficient size. We confirmed that with blending.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Nelson.
This question is for the local residents of Blanding, I guess. Having to rebuild a school practically across town, I guess. Has there been any concerns or any inputs from local families as to where possibility of building a new school out this direction might be too far for them, or are there any? Have you heard anything?
There's been a little bit of talk. It's not really super widely known. We haven't made a huge, well, you know, if people are following this, then they know. But if they're not following, they don't know. But it's still a residential area surrounded by homes. So it's in the northern part of Blanding, but it's still a residential area. So some people would be sad that there's a school there, and it'll add traffic to the area where they weren't previously used to that. And some will be sad that they had young elementary kids and they live near the school and everything's changing. But I believe we need to go with a space, an option that has enough space to adequately build the elementary school. I love the location that it is currently, but it's not big enough to accommodate what we need to in building a new one, you know, that's expected to last for the next 60 to 80 years or whatever. We need to go with a bigger lot size. And the other question would be, what would you do? How would we build it on that particular lot and still hold school, because it will take a couple of years to build? The other thing that, you know, hasn't been addressed yet is then what will we do with the school and the cost to demolish it or do something else with that school. But there will be pros and cons, and I would love to hear what the public thinks about it, but there will be people who like both sides.
Okay, all right.
Just one more comment. I asked that question because when we built the schools in Monument Valley, we had a lot of input from the local stakeholders. I'm just curious as what's said here in this community. I don't live in this town anymore, but my mother lived 2 blocks away from the current school, and my mom enjoyed hearing the kids playing when they're out for their lunch break and recess. Nice. And it just made her happy to hear the kids playing out there.
No, that's a good story. I love that. Well, I think it would be a great idea to get input and give, you know, and have people state why they believe one school or another. It is this community's school, so getting community input, I think, is vital. I think it's an excellent idea.
Now, I'm not opposed to getting public input, but as a board, making that decision, would you make it more based on the recommendation, or would you make the decision based more on public opinion?
Well, I would weigh out all those things based on what the public opinion is, but if the public had this information and was interested in giving us input, I would love to hear it. A lot of people might not want to give input, but...
So at this stage, with this information, then where are we at? With, if we get public input, I mean, where are we?
Time.
Yeah, time, where are we at?
As far as the timeline goes for, obviously, any decision we make the quicker we make a decision, it just pushes that timeline up and we're able to move forward a lot quicker. You're all very well aware of our timeline for the funding and trying to get as much, plan and preparation we can and before we submit an application for the Rural School District's Capital Projects Fund. I am not opposed to getting public input and getting that information. It does push us back. I guess it also kind of depends on our schedule for board meetings, with July coming up. Because if we don't have a board meeting in July, that pushes us back to the next board meeting being early August, which puts us 2 months behind. And the next item on our agenda is the report on the architect selection, having an architect on board, having them start to develop those plans without knowing where the school is going to go. And negotiating that contract with the architects becomes more challenging because we don't know where the school will be located and what our design capabilities are. So that poses some challenges, just from a timeline standpoint, that we'd be a little behind by pushing it back.
So this actually is an action item, so we can just see where it goes tonight. From there, when we get to voting. Okay.
And if there's any if there's any questions while we have Chris and Clint online as well, they'd be more than happy to answer any questions about those sites. They won't be around for our action item probably, but.
Sure. Okay. All right, do you just want to go on to that architect selection?
Yeah, this one will be really quick. You have the tabulation there from the evaluation committee that reviewed the 4 proposals that were submitted, and MHTN Architects was the highest scoring response that we received. And so the evaluation committee makes the recommendation that the board approve tonight for us to go into negotiations with MHTN architectural firm to design a new Blanding Elementary School and also help us with our security improvements for our 4 schools. So that's the report from the evaluation committee. If there's any questions about that, we can answer them, but that comes from that group.
All right, no questions? Okay. All right, we will go to number 4, our spend plans. That will be,
So I'm bringing to you 2 spend plans today from Monticello High School. The first is one that was a current spend plan that has an adjustment being made to it that is for U.S. history. They're adding nationals as an option. They took the template from our CTE spend plan. So that's what you're seeing is the exact funding template from our CTE plans. The amount for meals is generally about 4 days. The amount of meals is a little high, not knowing really they're held in Washington, D.C. Things cost a little more, so they estimated a little high. But certainly, that would be up to you how you want us to handle that. The second spend plan is the Manhattan Project. This is a new spend plan that we're bringing. This is the lost for really juniors and seniors only. It would be offered every other year. This is similar to the Shakespearean Festival, where it's just an opportunity. It's not required by any means. It's a co-curricular spend plan where if juniors and seniors want to attend, they could attend. This is held through the National Parks Council in Los Alamos and ties right in with the U.S. History 2 and Physics curriculum. This is the first viewing for both of those spend plans.
Does anyone have any questions with the advice?
On the,
I do. Okay, wait, I said, let's hold up. What? Is it clear now? Sorry.
Julie, is your mic on?
Okay, on the spend plan for History Fair, I've been under the impression that, I know so I'm just trying to sort this out through it's not anything that anybody's required to go, so does the school district need to fund that trip if a student wins and is invited to attend that?
So my understanding is that if it is on a spend plan, then that would be, you know, if someone is on a fee waiver, then that becomes the district's obligation. But we've allowed those with CTE, and so that's why they're adding it for History Fair.
Okay, and that's where I think we need to consider whether or not this is something that the school district should fund, because they can go, but it's not required. And, I mean, I guess nothing's required, but
Yeah.
do you know what I'm saying? It's if they go, great, they have a great time. If they don't go, but it's almost like senior gifts. Are we obligated to spend that money so that people can have a senior gift or go to the National History Fair?
I have a question. Has anybody qualified from the last year? I mean, do you have to qualify for nationals? Like, do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, to attend, you have to qualify.
Okay. Did we have any in the last school year?
Not positive.
I do know we've had winners in past years.
Right.
I don't know, if there's really a difference between our CT winners and our History Fair winners, so that's an interesting, so the point Julie's making, I think, is a good one, is that there is precedent set in that we already have this with all of our CTE national, our CTSO winners that win in competitions. I don't know if we want to draw that line between the two of them, but one thing to keep in mind is all of these national winners have approached the San Juan Foundation, San Juan School District Foundation first, and they have provided the bulk of the money from the foundation. I think they give $700 if it's back east, $500 if it's Midwest or West. So just be aware that that happens before this spend plan does kick in, because that comes before we ask the parents for any money, so it can work that way. So keep that in mind, is that the district has not been footing all of this bill, even in recent years. But I don't know if we want to draw a line between History Fair and CTE, or if we want to explore, is there a viable line there? I don't know that I see one myself. They're pretty much the same.
And I'm not advocating we draw the line. This one, I realized that, I guess I didn't think about the CTE before being like this, and that as a board, we make a decision if we fund those in the future or we don't fund those in the future on the spend plans. That was just thought about that. So yeah, because we're doing the others, I also think we should do this one.
Okay, any more questions? All right, these will be on again next month, or well, the next time we meet, so thank you. All right, Laura, we're going to discuss employee requests to make exceptions to the policy for sick leave.
Yes, we had an employee request an exception to the policy for the sick leave payout. I believe all of you have had a chance to review their letter outlining their reasoning for requesting the exception. I think in the email thread that's provided to you, I do make sure I let all of the employees know multiple times leading up to the deadline about the deadline, so they are given that ample notice that there is a March 1st deadline. So I just want to make sure that was clear as well.
Does anyone have any questions? This will be an action item. Is that correct?
Possible action item?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So the March 1st is for retirement deadlines?
Resignation and retirement, if they want to qualify for either the early notification bonus, which is $500 if you don't have at least 10 years with the school district, or the sick leave payout, which is for employees that have at least 10 years with the school district that could qualify for a portion of their sick leave to be paid out.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. The resignation is included in that?
Resignation and retirement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, have you looked at other districts and what they do, or is this similar to what other districts do, and specifically maybe the district that the employee is going to? Do they have the same policy or close to it?
So over the past year, so we have been looking at other school district sick leave policies just to see where we are. And with our payout, I feel confident saying that we are we are good to our employees with the payout. You don't see that with a lot of school districts, and if you do, the amount is a lot less. They have a cap at like $20 or $40 per day, where we pay a percentage of their daily rate. So ours is more favorable for employees that way. And this particular school district has been one I've looked at, and our policy is better for employees than this school district for a payout.
Okay, so just for clarification, if an employee lets us know by March 1st, they get the sick leave payout, and if they don't, then they don't get it.
Yeah, March 1st is the hard deadline, so if they let us know by March 1st and they have at least 10 years, they get a portion of their sick leave paid out. If they have less than that, they get a $500 bonus for letting us know by the deadline.
I think it's important to add that, we've tried to push that deadline as far back and still be beneficial to the district. The March 1st deadline is about as far back as you can push it and still get somewhat in the early part of the recruiting window, the very viable, healthy recruiting window. I mean, if you end up into late April and May recruiting, we're recruiting now. It's not the best time to be recruiting. So it is pushed back about as far as it can, trying to balance to be as helpful to our employees, but also as beneficial to our district. I do agree that it still could at times put our employees at a bind where they know they're leaving, but they don't know if they have a job, and should they submit something. I understand that, but the further we push that back, the less beneficial it is to the district and what we're trying to accomplish, so keep that in mind.
And to note that we have, or I guess a question, we have a lot of employees who leave and don't miss this deadline who don't ask for an exception. Is that accurate?
I'd say that's accurate, yes. Yeah.
All right.
Definitely have some. The lot's a tricky word, but definitely have. They're there, yes.
Okay. Any more questions? All right, you just stay there.
I'm gonna scoot over.
We'll have Julie and Trevor come up. We're going to talk about the Blanding City Resource Officer.
I can go first, so I can sit down. So my piece really is, if you vote to approve the SRO, one of the requirements is that we have a district policy that goes over what is required in the contract. So that policy that's been provided for you is the requirements of a contract with an SRO, and the one that the MOU we have hits all of those requirements.
Thank you, Laura.
So I will step in and just go over the idea itself and kind of how this has evolved. For several years in our Blanding schools, we have had an increasing need for law enforcement support in our schools. And we have found a huge benefit with having their presence and their support in our community. And it has become more increasing over the last few years. And we were watching legislation this year to see what was going to happen with House Bill 61, see if that was going to be a part of that before this all rolled out. And Blanding City came to us today, the school district, and proposed that they see the same thing on their side and would like to have a partnership with San Juan School District to bring an SRO to our Blanding area schools. We recognize that there is a need and that we really would like to collaborate. And so we began this process of looking at an MOU and working together to build something that we could share together to service all of our schools. So a school resource officer really is having law enforcement in the building, bringing them into the educational setting for preventative purposes. And Trevor will go over some of those. But we have met with Blanding City. We have drafted the MOU that you have access to. This person would be a city employee, a Blanding City employee, and the school district would contribute a portion of those, half of those funds, 50%, to pay for this SRO. So we have divided up. The schools have chosen that they would like to use TSSA funding, Teacher Student Success Act funding, which falls right under our Quest model for safety, and the appropriate uses for that. And they would all pay a portion of that and get a portion of that time in their schools. So San Juan High would have approximately 3 days, ARL would get 1.5, and Blanding Elementary would get 1 per week, and it would be, the funding would match those percentages. So do you want to speak to the prevention side of it?
Yeah, so just the prevention science model has 3 tiers. So it's not just a responsive program where you're just meeting them there when they're in crisis. They're there building relationships, teaching prevention lessons, doing the things that really that prevention science model has, which is having a school resource officer there on a more frequent basis, building relationships, teaching lessons, things that the students can see really make a difference. And so with that prevention science model, this really fits the mold for really any jurisdiction that wants to do this in the same area, to make the same contribution from the school end and from the jurisdiction, to be able to have an appropriate prevention science model in the schools, really preventing. In the PBIS model that you may be familiar with, one of the main things that you can do to prevent things from happening is just by being there. The same thing goes for community policing. Being able to be there as a presence helps to resolve a lot of things that you don't have to deal with by them not being there. So very supportive of that model, being able to start that in planning schools.
And we've had multiple requests over the years, as of many communities in San Juan School District, to look at this kind of a model. One recently came meeting with our White Mesa Youth Council. They have brought it up multiple times as something they see as a report and a real need, and we would love to act on that, allowing the schools to utilize their individual school funding to do this, not district-wide, so that any community that wanted to look at what some of this as an option could do that. If Monticello City or, we recognize the jurisdictions are different in other parts of regions of our district, but that could be something that at the school level and community level, communities and schools could come together on and make it work. This city employee would then in the summers go back to being a city employee, and then they would just come back during the school times, and we would work out with the schools just like they have in the past, support during evening events and things like that.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah. So would this officer or law enforcement be available every day throughout the school year?
Yes, so they would be available in the schools. So we've broken it up based on the amount of pay that each school would pay in. We really felt like the need was greatest when we met with all 3 administrators, that the need was greatest at San Juan High. And so they would get the majority of the time, approximately 3 days a week. So those would be full days. And then ARL would get 1.5, and then Blanding Elementary would get a half.
Interesting. Blanding City Police Department must have enough manpower, because I'm thinking back in
Monument Valley, which is under the Navajo Nation Kayenta Police District, that they wouldn't have the manpower, which, gone through this before.
Oh, and we're at Whitehorse as well. They're out of Shiprock, New Mexico Police Department. Because you're using school monies, is there something else, somebody else closer to law enforcement that could be in that capacity as well? If not a actual sworn-in police officer?
Yeah, some of the school districts have tried to go with the security model. The majority, the last I saw, there was one district trying that. The others have gone to school resource officers because security is monitoring the halls. The prevention science of having a certified person is working with students to in the areas of prevention. And so you're looking for that classification and that criteria. This actually would add this agreement would add another officer to the Blanding City Police Force. So they would add another position to be able to make this happen, utilizing the funds that they're contributing with the funds that we're contributing.
And I'm asking because, like you mentioned, jurisdiction is always an issue for us on the River Region School. So I'm just sitting here wondering what could work for us. Anyway, thank you.
Nelson, I would say this, we would intend to approach the Navajo Nation again with a similar opportunity. This is a 50-50 match for the most part, maybe even a little more. This planning coming up with more. And we've negotiated some of that with the Navajo Nation in the past, and we would love to go back to that table and see if we could arrange a similar situation for our river schools, where the river schools would put up some of their at-risk money and the money that's available to them, and the Navajo Nation would as well, and we'd be able to put SROs. We'd like to do something similar with the city of Monticello. So this is a model that we believe could be used in all areas of the district, and hopefully successfully bring more SROs into our schools.
I would add that the security model has the challenge of being your own entity. So it would still be San Juan School District security. Whereas partnering would allow you to work with those other entities that have jurisdiction to spend more time towards that. So partnering, and that's where the value would be, partnering with Blanding City, partnering with San Juan County, partnering with Navajo Nation is where that value lies, because then we're working together within our own means of jurisdiction to make it happen.
Well, that's just exactly what I'm saying. I can't see it happening with Navajo Nation Police Department. We've tried this before. It didn't work. And that's why I'm saying, is there somebody else who's close to law enforcement that we could probably use that would be more beneficial for our schools? And I'm glad to hear that,
think it's
Superintendent,
worth
what you
exploring.
said, because I didn't know, I didn't know if any of our river region schools are being looked at and thinking of safety issues. Because, I mean, we're hearing it now across this country about shootings.
For sure. You know, we did have an SRO in our Monument Valley schools, I think now it's 4 or 5 years ago, when I first came in as superintendent. And that did break down when, at a point, the Navajo Nation asked us to come up with 100% of the funds, and we couldn't do that. But I think things are different in today's world. There's a lot of interest about bringing these SROs back into our school buildings. So I think it's a good time to reapproach the Navajo Nation and just see if maybe we can reach a 50-50 more in that area agreement that could possibly bring the SROs back. And we plan on doing that. I've had a visit with district administration and even transitioning in with Christie that's going to continue to see. Now, you know, I'm not telling you I know where that'll go, but I'm telling you I know that this is a model that we need to take to these other municipalities and see if we can arrange something similar.
And for clarification, this proposal came from Blanding City to work with San Juan School,
Yeah.
the Blanding schools.
I seen it.
With this model, you're talking about preventative and setting as a model so we can template it to other schools within the district, right? So I would think you would want the SRO at the elementary so we can teach prevention. So the time being more at the elementary, at the junior high, and then at the high school level, because they would just reinforce what would need to be said at a high school level. So if we could, I think it would be more beneficial if we had the SRO at the elementary, teaching these preventatives at an elementary, junior high, and then into a high school level. Because, I mean, you can teach a younger person a lot easier than you could with a teenager, because they are a little bit more rebellious. And so I would think it would, if we could turn it the other way, that would be more beneficial. Is that something to consider?
There's definitely time allotted there, and that could be changed depending on the need. But there is time for those prevention lessons. The State Board of Education also has a safety center that is working with school safety. So this resource officer would have access to the State Office of Education support for a model program that we would like to work with as we implement that. That is curriculum and lessons and relationship building and response to truancy. There's a lot of things that are in that model policy or model program that could be implemented from the state of Utah. So it's exciting to see what type of things that they could do that we're not doing right now.
Right.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to quickly cover number 7, Superintendent, about the remote work policy.
Yes, this is coming before you. Actually, 7 and 8 probably both kind of line up the same way. Is that it is my recommendation that we look at a couple policies and just see if we still feel comfortable, if we agree with where they're at. Decisions that are often made years ago may not always fit as perfectly as the world changes and evolves. So that's kind of where we're at. This first one is even a possibility. There is no policy that guides us at this point, but it is asking you to, I'm wondering if we're at a point where we want to at least explore and talk about the possibility of some remote work positions within the district. This is being based upon logic and rationale that in industry, there are certain jobs that have evolved and moved towards these type of scenarios. Even in the town of Blanding, I'm aware of some of our health organizations and that do have some positions that are declared remote, and they allow those employees to be remote. And it's not in the best interest of the employee. I think they're looking at it as in the best interest of the organization. I'm not strongly, don't even know where I feel about all these things, but the only thing I feel strongly about is I think enough to bring it to the board and say, do we want to look at this in any regard? I have had a lot of requests come to me, concern in a couple of our positions that would maybe more line up with remote work by industry standards, and even some concern that we very possibly could start rolling people over very quickly and maybe not retaining them, and what that might mean for the district in the long run, and what that might mean down the road. The board is aware, I think, and I will, again say this, that in my tenure as superintendent, I have temporarily approved 2 individuals to work remotely. And one of those right now is a tech position. I base that on the best interest of the district in preparing for this next school year. There's numerous things in that area of tech and getting our programs to line up and talk to one another and be prepared to start a healthy and a very smooth start to the school year. We need those things to work well. So I've approved that on a temporary basis, but that will expire. There should be no pressure from that, whether or not we would look at this in a decision, in any type of decision, whether it's in the best interest of the district or not. So I just throw it out there and let the board know that I guess I would say, how I'd wrap this up, is I do think we're at a point where we stand to have a risk of losing and rolling over and not retaining some people in certain areas that industry is starting to move toward making more remote, and our personnel are attracted to those type of things, and that may cause us high turnover. And if we do have high turnover, there's no doubt that comes with a consequence. But on the flip side, anytime you make an exception, even in the best interest of the district, it's always the threat and the real reality that it's perceived often as based in the best interest of an individual. And that can cause a lot of friction and a lot of animosity and just a lot of drama within the organization. We've done some of this in the past. This isn't absolutely brand new. I don't know when we did this, and I haven't researched it, but we have a maintenance department that's on full-time 410s. Very few other positions in the district are. They may have some summer 410s, but they're not full-time 410s. But I know why we did that. I'm sure it was based on the best interest of the district and retaining those type of positions that were looking to have enough hours outside of their employment to still use their trade and their craft. So it was a good balance for the district. So I think that we've definitely looked through this lens before of trying to find that balance. And I don't know if we're there or not, but I bring it to you today. I don't think there's any pending urgency for a decision. I'm not in any way expecting that by the end of this meeting you're going to know anything or even have a left or right how to go. But I throw it out here today because if you do want to bring it back and so choose to, it can be brought back. And if you want to research or have any information brought back to you, that could happen as well. We could try to provide the data or I don't, anything that you might need, that if you want to bring it back and there's things that could be helpful to you, we can try to provide that. So anyway, I turn it over to the board. with that introduction.
Well, first of all, this is a little vague and of exactly what we're looking at as and you mentioned that you temporarily approved that it was in the best interest of the district, and the district, so I guess my question is, how is it in the best interest of the district for somebody to work from home versus working at the district? But before you answer that, I also want to report on what I know historically why the buildings and grounds work 410s. It's not because they wanted Friday off, it's because our district is very, very large, as everyone knows. So when they get in their vehicles and head to Monument Valley or head to Navajo Mountain, down to, White Horse, Montezuma Creek area, that it makes a whole lot more sense to travel down there and work a long day than travel down there, work a shorter day, travel back home, travel back down, and when it's it was never an exception for the maintenance department to get a day off. It was just to make better use of the travel time and get more work done and cost the district less
In the
money
best
in
interest
just
of-
traveling.
So the best
Yeah.
interest of the district.
Yes.
That's what I,
and
yeah, that's what I tried.
And so then, I'm curious how and I know it's an industry standard, so I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I know in the industry I'm in, the tech people, a lot of them, the IT people, are working from home. A lot of them work right in the, facility as well, but some of them do work from home. But I'm interested in to know how it was in the best interest of the district for the person to specifically work from home.
I was approached by 2 or 3 individuals.
And I brought about 2 more individuals together, so there were about 5 of us, and we explored what it would mean to lose that individual immediately, what the disadvantages would be with our program, our software, our preparations
for school, and it appeared that it would be overwhelmingly, put us in a tremendous negative place as far as being prepared throughout the summer, bringing someone on in this very crucial time of getting everything up and ready for next year, and it would definitely put the district way behind. And so with that in mind, I made that decision, and that's how I deemed it was in the best interest of the district after I got input from multiple people.
Thank you.
So with the board, did you have a question?
Not a question, I'd like to see us pursue the discussion a little bit more. I guess I have some feelings and thoughts on the matter, but it's probably not appropriate for today, but in a further discussion.
Laura,
I agree.
I read the policy once, but I've read a lot over the last couple days. So just to clarify in the policy, do we have in there, so the superintendent would take that as a case-by-case basis according to the policy? Just refresh me on that. Or do we have a rubric? Do we have, that's.
As it's written right now, it's a case by case based off some of that criteria there, so not a real hard rubric. This policy is actually, I don't want to say copied, but we used the policy that the Utah State Board of Education is using, so we kind of adjusted a few things, but that's kind of where the framework from this came from.
Okay. All right, so let's just move this to our next board meeting. We'll go into
Sounds
further
good.
discussion, so.
Should we jump to
Yes. So
presentations?
we're at 4 o'clock, which we actually have presentations scheduled, so hold tight. So we're going to have Shannon, will you come up first, actually, and then we'll have Paul finish his part and do his presentation. That works. So. Thank you for being with us. We're glad you're here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shannon Dustuff, and I am the assessment director here for San Juan School District. And today I wanted to kind of give you guys an overview of our assessment department and how it functions here at San Juan School District. There's a link there, if somebody can pull it up. I've got a little bit of visuals to help us, because you say the word assessment and everybody's like, It's true. But I just wanted to kind of go over it. What assessment even is and how we approach this from San Juan School District. So, is it
I'm having a mouse problem.
Okay. Technology issues. Well, he can keep working on that. Basically, what assessment is, if we're going to define the word, and we're talking about our students here in San Juan School District, our students come first. Student assessment is basically the process of gathering information from the students as to what degree these students have attained the standards that have been identified in the district and the state core curriculum. How well do they know these standards? That's what assessment is basically doing for our students. And actually on regulation, and it's 277-404, and this is from the State Board of Education. It's the requirement for assessments of student achievement. And basically what they set forth in this rule, and they say an LEA shall administer statewide assessments to all students enrolled in the grade level or course to which the assessment applies. So this is mandated from the state that we as an LEA will do these assessments for students. So that comes to me as the assessment director. What are some things that I do to help fulfill these state laws that are in place? And some of the things that I do as an assessment director is I make sure, or I ensure that these state assessments are being administered. Okay, I make sure that I'm working with all the schools. I coordinate with USBE to make sure that the testing information is distributed. I have monthly meetings with the state, assessment director meetings, where they distribute testing information from the state to me, and then I turn around and I regularly communicate with each school. Each school has testing coordinators, and usually in elementary, that's the principals. And in secondary schools, it's usually the assistant principals that are the school testing coordinators. So I make sure to distribute all the information from the state down to the schools so that they know any updates, any changes that have been made in testing platforms. I do the technical stuff. I create accounts for testing proctors. And I troubleshoot when it's testing. I troubleshoot any testing issues we have. And then I ensure once we get the data from our tests that data is accessible both to district administration, to school administration, and to teachers so that they can see this data and use this data, because when it comes to data, our goal is to use our data to drive our teaching and instruction to help our students to be able to efficiently learn. That's our goals. Now, what I wanted to do, and hopefully we'll get this up because I've got some graphs that I can explain it to you, but it's much easier once we get them up and going. So we're going to look at some of the assessments. Well, we're going to look at the assessments that we do here in San Juan School District, the state assessments that we do. And we're going to look at some scores, but I want to let you know the scores are from the raw data, from the test that we just took this spring. And let me explain to you what the raw data is. All the scores that we got from this spring, I've taken them and put them into, it should be the link. I'm under Shannon. Yes. Yes, board presentation. Perfect. Perfect timing. Technology will come through, we hope. Anyways, so I'm going to show you the raw data. So the published reports, every fall the state publishes reports with the data from our assessment. And the report that gets published in the fall might show a slight variation from what I show you today. And the reason for that is the state calculates only valid test scores. I just pulled in all the test scores. And in order to be valid, there are 3 things that the state looks at. In order for a test to have a valid score, the student must meet the participation criteria. And what this actually is the student has to be enrolled in the same school for at least 160 days. So students that aren't there at a school very long, they throw out those scores. Secondly, the students have to have answered at least 85% of the test questions, of the items on the assessment. If they only answered a couple, those scores get thrown. And then the test must not be invalidated through a participation code, which means parental exclusion. So if parental exclusions have been added there, they take those out too, okay? So if you can go to, and I don't know if will you click through, go to the 3rd slide.
Here's the 4th.
Are you guys seeing this on your screen?
Uh-huh.
Perfect. That's okay, technology we love. We're going to talk first about WIDA, okay? So it will show up hopefully here in a second. We'll get that screen for you. But basically, LEAs are required to administer a WIDA screener to newly enrolled students who indicate on the home language survey that they speak any language other than English. So on the home survey, there we go. On the home survey, if they indicate that they speak any language other than English, then they get screened for our WIDA screener. Now in the screener, students are eligible for English language services if they earn a score of either from 1 to 4.9 on the screener, and this is grades K through 12. Okay, all EL students must be tested annually using the WIDA Access Assessment. So if they've been designated as an EL student, every year they will take this, what's called the WIDA Access Test. Now this assessment is administered and it measures the student's progress in achieving proficiency in speaking, listening, comprehending, reading, and writing academic English. Okay, so it's testing that. And when students can earn a proficiency level of 5 or higher, then they're considered fluent in English and they do not have to take the WIDA test anymore. Okay? So if you go to the next screen, this shows our raw WIDA scores. It shows our percentage of students at the different proficiency level. Now our proficiency levels start at 1, which is entering, go to 6, which is reaching, which you won't see any data there. Remember, at 5, if they reach a 5, they test out of WIDA and they no longer have to test. I have the blue bar graphs are our test scores from 2021, and then the yellow scores are scores from this year for WIDA. And as you can see, most of our students here, and this is a district snapshot, so most of our students are at a developing or a level 3. So as we work with these students, we can move them to a 4, and once they reach a 5, then they are out of WIDA testing. So, and I don't know if it's easier for me to say, I'll save questions for the end, but if you have a burning question on one of these, because we're going to be talking about several, just interrupt me. I'm fine with that. So if you go to the next screen, or the next slide, so the ACT test, that's probably one that you're more familiar with hearing. And the ACT test is a U.S. college admissions test, and it measures what students learn in high school to determine how ready they are for college. And I know lots of times in the past, colleges have used the ATC scores to gain admittance, and now with everything that's been happening with COVID, that's kind of been in flux. But we offer the ACT test to our juniors, okay, in 11th grade. If you go to the next screen, you can see the high score on ACT is a 36. Right now, I've graphed the mean scores, and this is district-wide. Now, we have different categories. We have composite, we have math, science, STEM. Now, STEM actually represents the overall performance of the science and math together, okay? And then we have English and reading. And then I compared, the blue again is the 2020 and 2021 years, and the yellow is our most recent year, 22-23. And it's interesting to see, I know we have had some challenges with COVID, but it's nice to see that our numbers actually have increased in all areas but math. It did drop a little bit in math, but it's kind of fun to see those comparisons. If you'll go to the next slide, we're going to talk about RISE. The RISE summative assessments, that's the end of year assessment that's given in grades 3 through 8. And it is an untimed test. It's given at the end of the school year to measure how well the students know the Utah core standards. Now the Utah core standards are English language arts. Writing is only given to grades 5 and 8. Math is 3 through 8, and science doesn't start their assessments until grade 4, so grades 4 through 8. Okay? So looking at the data, these graphs look a little bit differently. If you'll go to the next slide. Where we actually have percentages, and they actually are looking at proficiency. So you can see the red / pink, that's our percent of proficiency that's below proficient. The yellow is approaching proficient, the green is proficient, and the blue is highly proficient. And if it's hard to see the numbers, I have 20, 21, 22 on the bottom, and 22, 23 on the top there, as far as district overall scores. So you can see where we are, where we were last year. you want to go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I should have said that was math. I broke these up into subjects, so that was math, okay? If you go to the next slide, that is our ELA, so it's the same thing. This is for our ELA tests, our students for ELA. And then if you go to the next one, this is science. And remember, this is just grades 4 through 8, where ELA and math were grades 3 through 8. If you go to the next slide, we have Utah Aspire Plus, and this is the assessment that's given to grades 9 and 10. It's actually a timed test, and it's given at the end of the year to all 9th and 10th graders. And it includes a combination of test questions from the ACT Aspire and Utah's Content Standard Item Bank. And this is supposed to be kind of a predictor, an earlier predictor for what the ACT score will be once they get to 11th grade. And that is given in English, in reading, in math, and in science. And it shows you the different times that we have there. This is timed whereas the RICE tests are not timed. If you want to go to the next slide, we'll look at the data. So for English, same thing. It shows below proficient, approaching proficient, proficient, and highly proficient. This is in English. And again, this most recent year is up on top, the 22-23. The year below is the 21-22. So that's what our district snapshot is for English. If you want to go to the next one, this is showing where we're at as far as reading scores go for our district. And we can see we've moved a lot of our below proficient into approaching proficient. If you want to go to the next one, that is math. And that's a little snapshot of where we are with our raw data for math. And then finally, the last one would be science. And there's where we are for science. Those are kind of the assessments that we do here in San Juan School District. And my last slide is questions. I wanted to give you, that's a lot of, I know it's a lot of data heavy, a lot of stuff like that, but that's just kind of a general overview of our assessments and what we do here in San Juan. So now I just wanted to open it to questions you guys might have for me.
Does anyone have any questions?
I know it's hard.
So remind us the acronym for WIDA.
You know what? That's a good question. I don't even know what that is. I just know WIDA is our English language proficiency test.
Okay, that works.
Does anybody care? Yeah.
World-class instructional design assessment.
Okay.
Former assessment director that I am learning a lot from, so.
Well, okay, that makes sense. I know everything's in acronyms.
Everything's an acronym. So.
Yep. So, does anyone have any questions? Okay. We appreciate you coming and what you do. Thank
Thanks,
you for that
Shannon.
information. Okay, Mr. Paul Murdoch.
President Juan, which one did you want me to start with?
Why don't you do the report first, and then we'll jump up to your policy real quick while you're there.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, I heard that there was a little mix-up in slides. So Jared, if you want to open those up, we'll go through the slides. You can ask me questions about that. If you do have them before you, I just wanted to show some of the data that we have as a department. And looking at that, I do have to say I really appreciate that I'm not talking about assessment this year. So that's a very good thing to be able to focus on these different things. So
We're still
that's
downloading.
the same one, yeah.
Assessment.
Can you hit refresh on your,
Oh,
oh wait, are you under Paul down there?
Still under
yes,
Shandon.
Hit refresh and then let's try it again with Paul. It's working.
Well, and to be honest with your department, just having looked over your policy, it is like another language.
Oh, that's Shannon.
With
For you to keep all that straight, it's pretty remarkable.
with special education, everything is mandated
Sure.
and often litigated. So
Yes. I don't know how you keep it straight.
there's lots of great supports that are available at the state level in district as well. So if we go to the second slide, this is our numbers based on our classifications. So we have 13 classifications in special education. You'll see the total number of students on the right that we have in special education in our district. I've broken it down by race, Hispanic or non-Hispanic, and then also male or gender. And then you can see the totals across the board there. Our biggest category is specific learning disability. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the procedure, policies and procedures manual. If you'll go to the third slide. This one, I broke it down by how many students are served by an IEP or how many students with disabilities in each grade level across the district. Tried to do that in a user-friendly format. And then slide 4, I wanted to talk about school nurses. In our state report that we filed to the state, we had a total of 9,623 office visits, so to the health office or to the school office for health reasons. There were 5 911 calls that were reported as far as a health concern goes. And then out of all of those office visits, we did need to send home 1,003 students. And when you look at data based on days, and I didn't have this exactly broken down, so that's why I didn't include that here. But if you look at days that the number of students that are sent home when they report to the office sick with a nurse in the building as opposed to a nurse out of the building, it's dramatically less. So when there's a nurse there, we work hard to keep those kids in the building, and that's their specialty, right? So that makes sense. The 5th slide, please. This is a lot of words. Every year, we are required to submit a Utah Program Improvement Plan for education. And so these are our goals that we submitted with that. The first 2 deal with the students with students with disabilities performance on the end of level assessment RISE or Utah Aspire Plus. So our students with disabilities that participate in the regular assessment, that's those 2. And we're looking at a goal that over 3 years, we're gonna see some marked improvement there. The 3rd and 4th goal are for our students who qualify for and participate in the alternate assessment at the end of the school year. We wanna see some improvement there as well. Numbers 5 and 6 deal with our preschool outcomes. Every year, our preschool teachers enter data into a program called UPOD, and we want to improve those. I really do think it is a reporting error, and so we're going to get some training on that. But also, we've talked about adopting a new preschool curriculum as well that aligns with the new preschool standards. So we're working on all of those things. And then number 7 is a transitions goal. The state of Utah is focusing on transitions. Transition is when a student either graduates from San Juan School District with a regular diploma or certificate of completion, or they age out at age 22. What are they going to do after high school if they're a student with a disability? So the state contacts every single student with a disability throughout the state, or attempts to, and finds out what they're doing. Are they gainfully employed? Are they going to school? Have they got a trade? What does that look like? So we want to improve those outcomes. So I have 3 sub-goals there. So we want to make sure that our enrollment of our students in educational opportunities post-secondary does increase, that we also work to increase gainful employment for our students with disabilities. And then there's an option within the system, so I'm going to have the state try to contact those families, and then I or KD will be contacting those families after the state has tried, so that we can get better data on what those students are doing and work on that. So those are our big goals there. Yes, number 6, please. Some celebrations. I talked about this last year, but we have an amazing staff in San Juan School District, both special education and general education. They are committed to our students. They're committed to helping our administrators. Our general ed teachers and our special education teachers are just awesome. And then my itinerant team that I work with as well is really incredible. They show up ready to work, do their job, get out there, and just work for the betterment of students. We also are using some ESSER funding to work with a company called iLearn that is providing some supports both to me as a special education leader, but to our special education teachers. And that's going to be happening all next school year. There's going to be trainings for our principals and assistant principals, and we're really excited. I'm in the process of planning what the year would look like with that, so that's been a good thing. And then that follows into working with our school district leadership to think of outside the box solutions. when we are in such a critical area of shortages, especially in special education. And so our district leadership is open to ideas, thinking of new ways to do things, thinking of different ways, allowing for contracts to be in place when we can't find personnel, and just working to do that. Special education is critical for the district, and it's critical for our students to hopefully have higher outcomes, so that's what we're working towards. And then last of all, I did put some of our challenges. Currently, we have 4 special education teaching jobs open, and we're working to fill those and recruiting those. Last week at a meeting, I was really trying hard to recruit somebody, and she's like, maybe in a year or 2, I'll come on down. So we'll see if we get an application that way. With the retirement of Teresa Gardner, we're down 1 more speech language pathologist, so we're working to recruit speech language pathologists there. I think we have some good news there, but we're also going to be using a contract provider as well next year. I'm very certain of that. And then we definitely want to see improvement. This was in my goals of our students on end-of-level testing, students with disabilities. And then we want to exit more students from special education because we've worked ourselves out of a job. Now, there will always be students with disabilities, but we want to see that special education isn't a life sentence, that it is there for when they need it, and that we do our job and we get them out of special education as quickly as possible and as appropriate too. We don't want to exit anybody that qualifies. We want to exit those that no longer need those services. What questions do you have? It was very quick.
I do, I guess.
Go ahead.
On your challenges, you say exiting students from special education. And then looking on here, your specific learning disabilities, is that one of the big challenges hindering, or is that?
So when students qualify for a specific learning disability, and we'll talk about this in the policies and procedures when we go through those 2 documents there, it means that there's something going on with the student that we cannot pinpoint that is a deficit in their learning, either specifically in math or reading, maybe both, and then we work to try and serve them in those areas. So for some reason, specific learning disability outweighs every other category by far. Right. We work hard to meet those students where they're at, but it is a challenge when we are intervening or providing specialized instruction for those students and they're not responsive. We're trying to change what we do and how to help them and just really work to help them be more successful. So that is one area that would be, hey, maybe we could move some more students out. What do we need to do to make that happen? And that's what we're working on.
Okay.
All right, I know that you always have challenges with the positions to be filled.
Sure.
That's ongoing. Yeah. So, but thank you for that information. And then if you do just want to jump into your policy.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Since you're right there.
So it's usually a 4 or 5 year turnaround process, but the state did update their adoption of IDEA rules, so Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act rules. So that's why they've required that we change our policies and procedures manual. We did this 2 years ago. I did include this document that talks about kind of why that is, so I'll highlight a couple things. Utah for years and years, there's this category developmental delay that's usually in preschool age or younger students. Utah would say, hey, by age 8, they need to be out of developmental delay. IDEA, federally, they say they can be classified into that with age up till age 9, so that's what we're going to do. So it's through age 8. So Utah's adopted that as well. There was a category called emotional disturbance that's now been changed to emotional behavior disability. We do need to make sure that in our students who have an IEP that are age 14 or older have a goal related to their transition plan. So we've been working on that as a district for 2 years now. A big push across the state is better inclusion of students with disabilities in the general education setting. So we have to adopt policies there, and that is part of that document as well. And those are kind of the main changes that I've worked on. And as part of the inclusionary practices, there is a state
Inclusionary Practices Conference that's occurring for the first time this summer, 4 different locations, and that's kind of taking place of our multi-tiered systems of support conference. So that's the policies and procedures.
I also included our document on how we classify students for specific learning disability. And that's the San Juan School District Comprehensive Assessment of Specific Learning Disability. We revise, so what happens is you guys will either choose to approve and adopt these or not in your action items. And they recommend that they're adopted and approved separately, so that's why they're presented separately. But this goes through and details what would qualify a student for special education under specific learning disability. And we sent this document up to be reviewed as well. One additional, we have to look at a whole new set of data as well as when we qualify these students from here on out, and that is longitudinal data. So looking at grades, looking at assessment data, whether that's end-of-level state assessment data or benchmark, district benchmark. We can look at grade level assessments related to the curriculum that they have. We'll also include a teacher interview, or at the secondary level, probably more interviews or surveys, so that we're looking at this data longitudinally, not just a snapshot in time. So that's a recommendation from the state that we've chose to present today to be accepted there. So that's the policy and procedures manual. Any questions on that?
No. Anyone else have questions? Oh, go ahead, Steve.
So I understand this is district policy we're approving here. And I just question why it's not codified with the other district policy, give it a number, and have all of the district policy that the board approves all in one body.
Yeah, I don't.
So.
Does anyone here
Laura, do
have
you
an
know
answer
that
to that? So, the policies and procedures manual that we use for special education isn't listed as part of district policy there, and I don't know the answer for that.
Is it by
Sorry.
state law that it has to be approved each year, and it has to be a standalone document that is approved all year? That would be my,
Yeah, you're asking a great question.
We could bring
I mean,
that,
our policy manual, if it doesn't come back, it's approved for forever, but, you know, we revise it, but this, I think, is codified that it has to be approved yearly. So I think it's just kind of a standalone policy manual.
I can look at that and work to find an answer and email the board back on that and see. And I don't know if other districts have it as part of their policy like this, so I can do some research and try to find an answer on that for you. I do, one part of the process is that they provide a template. We go in and fill out our information. We send it to USBE for their approval. Then we bring it to the board. Once you guys approve it, then I let USBE know that it has been approved by you guys, and that's all part of the process. So,
See, that's way more involved than policy manuals. I think that's why,
so I don't.
because it has.
is yours, do you have a timeline on this? So you can find out that information, or do we have to have a?
No, I can find that out independently of this approval or not.
Oh.
It is, the due date for this is October.
Okay.
When school starts, it's a madhouse, right? So we
Okay.
work hard to get it done early. But I can work to find out that information and email the board on that.
So do we at least have a cross-reference in our policies, like under special, to say, hey, this is attached, or this is where you would find that? Because maybe we need to have a,
Not that I'm aware of.
because maybe we need to at least let people
Yep.
know where to find that information.
Sure.
If they got on the website, so.
I do have our policies and procedures manual on our website on the
Yeah.
special education page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, not about this.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
So,
flexible.
Are you, okay, you good?
No,
Oh, it's
Do you have
for
a
me?
question for him?
no.
Okay.
No. I just want to note, before the next one, that when we approve an agenda, we approve the order as well as the items, and so.
Is that
we're
a
not-
rule? Is that like the rule? Or that
Yeah,
we just?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So I
It's not up to
apologize to both
the,
of
it's
you.
not,
Come
you
on
know,
up. We'll
up
do
to you to
number
just switch it around.
8?
Good afternoon. Okay. You want to take this, Ron?
Well, let me just lead out, Principal Nielsen. I would just lead out with, this is kind of similar to what we brought up with the remote work, although with the remote work, there's no policy, and in this case, there is a policy in place, and that policy does state that secondary administration cannot coach. I want the board to be aware that I think it was 6 or 7 years ago that the board was approached, those of you that were on the board, for an exception to this policy, and it was granted, so there is precedent set in this area. And so what, again, looking at times, decision that was made years ago may or may not still hold all the same amount of pros and cons in the present that it held years ago. And we do know that we've had a tremendous shortage of coaches and a tremendous effort to try to keep coaches and advisors in our programs. And so we are now petitioning the board with a possible exception to this policy and allow Mr. Barkley Christensen he has interviewed for the position, he has been offered, and but under current policy, he would have to resign as his football position. And so there is.
We know how important we don't want that to happen.
So I'm going to turn it over to you now if you'd like to add anything to that.
So we had our interviewing process. We only had one applicant. It was Mr. Christensen. Regardless of what we had an exceptional candidate that would make a difference for San Juan High. We know what Coach Christensen does on the football field and off. I'll tell a story real quick with the superintendent, if you don't mind. The day after he took state in football, that Monday back, the superintendent went to go congratulate him, and Coach Christensen's up there teaching class. And I don't know if a lot of coaches could do that, but this man would be an exceptional leader within our school. He has a lot of influence with football players and non-football players. He's able to connect with students. He's got tons of support from me to help support him to continue to coach. Every year I get calls from other places that want him to go coach their high school, and I want to do whatever I can to keep him here at San Juan High. And I think this is a great opportunity for him to make a big influence on all kids, not just our football kids. We have 90 kids, a fourth of our school play football. Here he has a great influence on that. You go in his classrooms, in his observation, he's very professional. He's very academic oriented. He's very goal oriented. And he's a great leader within our school. So I would hope that we can have an exception to this rule so that he can continue to improve his career as a vice principal and continue to coach football, because he's shown it. If anyone could do it, it's Mr. Christensen. He could coach and be a vice principal at the same time. I have zero doubt with that.
If I could just echo that. I am in support of this. I would, my recommendation is to the board is that I think this is a very positive step for San Juan High and for Mr. Christensen. I do believe that there are some implications beyond San Juan High that are a reality, that this does open a door, and maybe not in all cases what Mr. Nielsen just said right there would be echoed in all similar situations throughout the district. So with my recommendation would be that I actually think maybe the policy needs to be revised so that there is an exception built into it that would require either this very thing to happen, where an exception would become before the board, where you would hear from a supervisor and a superintendent, or if you would rather, it could be a supervisor taking it to the superintendent and the superintendent making that decision. Because I think there needs to be some check and balance of making sure that each and every one of these individual situations have the same dynamics playing out positively in the best interest of the district that I believe this one has.
And this is
So
in the
anyway.
best interest of our school, to be honest.
That
And
would-
it's happened in other districts where football coaches, one of my good friends was a vice principal at Juen, coached football for 19, 20 years, successful in both areas as a coach. Mike Bowering, that used to teach here. So I think with the support, and I know we have the support of the staff, some staff members are here in support for that as well, to see this climate, this leader come into our school and make a difference for all of us. You have any questions or concerns you want to ask? I really appreciate the time to be able to do this too.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So on the Fridays that there are away games, will you be in the school on those days?
Absolutely. I will not, like I said, he has the support of me if he's got to be at a game on Friday, which is nice. Football's a little bit different too, because you're only looking at maybe 5 or 6 road trips. And
Totally.
I will definitely not leave the school alone. I'll be there. And if I wanted to go later, I'll wait till the school's over to get up to a game or something as the administrator of football games, because they like us there as well. But football is one of those, practice he'll start for. If some emergency comes in at the school, he'll take care of it. He's got great assistant coaches. They're in support of this as well. And again, we'll work really well as a team. And that's why I'm really excited about this opportunity to see what we are capable of doing at San Juan High as him as an administrator.
Steve, did you have a question?
It seems to me that if we have exceptions to this that we're approving, that we need to examine the policy. And I think the purpose of the board really is to focus on policy rather than focus on, just doing exceptions coming to the board. And so you presented some great arguments about your case here, but I'd like to ask, why do we have the policy, and what are the downsides of it?
And let me echo that it's very hard to find coaches. I still have 2 or 3 positions to find, and there's a lot of good people here willing to coach, and I'd hope that we'd look at it a little bit differently in the future. As far as my end, I need a decision because I have to move forward, whether it's a new social studies teacher or a new vice principal. But I've got to get moving because we're late in the game in June as far as hiring someone else.
Can I speak to your comment, Mr. President Black?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and that's why I recommend that we revise this policy. I believe that, I do think policy is always going to be looked at and revisited. It's just, things don't ever stay exactly the same. So policy coming before the board's going to be a routine thing, and it has been. And I think this policy now needs to come back before the board. I think we've reached a point where finding coaches 25 years ago, 15 years ago, was not as challenging as today. We are really, really hard-pressed in a number of areas. We've had some programs that we have dropped because we have not found an advisor for them. And that's sad, because this is where you're saying, would kids want to participate? Possibly. But with no advisor, we can't sponsor that program. So I do think we've probably reached, I would recommend we bring this policy back to the board, and I would recommend it has an exception policy built into it. Now, I would say this, I do see both the pros and the cons, and I do think there could be a time when the pros outweigh the cons, and there could be a time when the cons outweigh the pros. And that's why I think in the policy, there needs to be an appeal process where a supervisor and a very possibly even a second supervisor, whether that be assistant superintendent or whether that be the superintendent, have to weigh in and determine whether the pros or the cons are outweighing the other. Because I hate to say it, but there's just not a one-size-fits-all.
But now, we're talking about a very unique individual. We're talking about football. What's that? Oh, is it too loud?
It has a time limit.
Yeah, and I'm probably hitting it.
But we're talking about football, which is a very also abbreviated season compared to like basketball. Anyway, so there's some variables that I think have to be looked at in every individual case. And the question is, in my recommendation, the question is, does the board want to wrestle with the exceptions, or would they rather make that an administrative function? That's what I would recommend that you look at. But I do believe in this individual case, I do recommend that this be allowed to move forward.
I would like to add to Steve's comments about looking at the policy, though, in general, and allowing I think we need to have a work session or something where we look at why this was decided years ago, what other districts do that are rural, and you know, 1, 2, 3A districts and how they handle it, and that this isn't the only situation where it's a good idea. We have a need across our entire district for excellent coaches and administration. We know that often our administration pool isn't deep when people interview. And then we also know we want really quality people working with our students administratively and as coaches and advisors. So I think we ought to look at the policy generally and not look at always making exceptions, because it gets real sticky. But I agree with this, and then think we should move it forward in the future with a possible policy change.
So this is actually a possible action item for tonight for the exception. And then it sounds like we'd like to bring the policy back. So that's two different things, just to clarify. So I would think we would work with Laura over the next couple months. So we can have something come back in the next couple, 3 months that would help kind of reiterate that feeling of what we'd like to look into, so.
Yes, but I would think there is some urgency in that exception to this policy in this individual case. For right now, we'd need to make a motion.
Yes, and that is on there
Okay.
too, for that.
Thank you.
just to
This is
clarify.
our timeline, our situation.
Yes, and then Nelson has a comment.
I want the fun part. Is that coach here?
Coach is here.
I would appreciate your back-to-back championship.
There you go.
And he's guaranteed a three-peat, so.
He's guaranteed?
Just kidding.
Didn't know that, huh?
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, guys.
All right, thanks.
Good job, Nelson.
Okay, will you, number 10, sorry. I thought my phone was. Number 10 and 11, this goes along with our federal impact aid.
This goes
and
along with
policies, the
Native American Policy and Procedures Manual. Both of these are declared in there that we will do this very thing, that we will look at our data participation. Our objective is to see if we are providing equal access to our programs and our activities for all students, primarily our Native students in this case. Impact aid dollars go into the general fund, they're spread out, but they still should be some form of evidence that they are offering opportunity for Native students on an equal access to these programs. And then the other document is a question and answer where we declare if we receive any official questions. Most of these have come either out of a board meeting or in some other way. We have definitely seen a drop in the number of questions since we haven't been attending our visits in person. We received a lot more of them when we were in person. So I think in the future years, you'll see that number climb back up. But those are proposed answers. That's just me speaking as proposed from the board. If anyone wants to revise any of those or recommend making a motion that we revise it, that could happen for the official record. So that's the data that's in front of you. This is sent out to all of our Native chapter, our tribal leaders all receive this data and this information. So they have received it, and our chapter house leaders have received it, so.
I just want to go back on why we're not getting as much questions like we used to was because of pandemic. Because of, people were not in person as often anymore.
Well, that leads into my question is, why we have so few? I mean, where was it advertised? I try to look for it myself too, and I had a couple of parents ask, like, where can I make a comment other than the board meetings or here and there, or is there a suggestion box, or, you know.
Every school, there's a tablet.
Right.
I should have brought one down as an example. It just says, if you would like to, do you have one in front? Well, she'll show you right here.
On the table here for every board meeting as well.
And then there, at every school, I do find times that they don't have it out there, and I remind them, but we try to have this at every school in the front office, so you might watch for these as you enter, and ask the principal if you don't see one, because that would be.
This is our standard comment.
And then we take these to the chapter houses when we visit, and that's where, when we visited in person, when we took those right to the chapter houses, we got a lot of lot more participation. So we'll get back to that, as you said, with the pandemic coming to an end, so.
Is there a way, like, I mean, it's all good and well if you go to the school. I mean, there's a lot of parents that work far. Is there's this online too that
Yeah,
they
we can put
can?
that online. I don't know that that is online right now.
Any question that was sent to me via email or on the standard form or asked in a board meeting that was remotely related to Native American education was included on this.
Okay.
So there were some comments that weren't necessarily on the specialized form, but that came in the form of an email.
Right.
Or a different method that we felt was, met the criteria to be specific to how we're working on improving that. So I added those as well without exclusively using the ones that were submitted on the form.
Gotcha.
We could put those online, though.
Well,
That'd be a good idea.
I know that these are there myself, you know, because I'm pretty, I look, but these are for my parents who don't know, because that seems to be a lot of the questions to the parents in the community is where do I find it? Where is it advertised? And, you know, should there be a problem or anything like that? Now we know. More. Just to reiterate that for them.
Did you say these responses are already delivered?
They are delivered, but they are as proposed responses, yes.
So they,
We would.
they have been or have not yet been?
These have been sent out
Oh.
because they are required to be sent out prior to this meeting by our Native American policy procedures.
Okay.
So these are, but they do say these are proposed answers. These are draft answers. So if we finalize them, we'd probably send it back out as a final.
Well, I guess my only comment was to just fix the spelling errors in it, but
We'll look at that.
Okay. All right, we are finished with our discussion items, so I don't see anything, I am not aware of anything for closed. So
Do you have closed?
what, do we have a closed?
The superintendent?
Yeah, she's requesting a close.
Oh, you
First.
requested a close?
We do 11?
Yeah, those two were combined.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have requested closed session? Okay. So we could actually do that before we'll.
It was more of a request of the superintendent's meeting, but, yeah.
I'm sorry, clarify who
We'll
requested
just-
close?
I think it's your request, right, to go into close?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it's not your request. Okay.
Out of this
Suggestion.
All right, so let's, I need a motion to go into closed session for the discussion of
Personnel.
personnel.
I move to go into closed session to discuss personnel.
Hey.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, roll call.
Mary Shumway, yes?
Nelson Yellman, yes?
Lori Mon, yes.
Steve Black, yes.
Colleen Benelli, yes?
And Nan Barton, yes.
Okay, all right, we're going to close. Thank you.
Awesome. These doors.
Oh, thank you.